cruiser HMS Perth is a British-built warship that served in the Royal Australian Navy. Technically, it belongs to the modified Leander class, also known as the modified Leander. This ship took an active part in combat operations in various naval theaters and has a rich service history. To understand the specific features of Perth, it is useful to examine the history of the origin of the Leander class itself and the prerequisites for its design. Ships of this series were traditionally named after characters from ancient Greek mythology. The lead ship was named after Leander, a hero of ancient myth who, according to legend, swam across a strait to his beloved but died. Other ships in the series bore the names Ajax, Achilles, and Amphion. It was the cruiser Amphion that was subsequently transferred to Australia and renamed Perth. The design of these ships was carried out under the conditions of international naval agreements of the early 20th century. The Washington Naval Treaty established limits for cruisers, displacement of no more than 10,000 tons, and artillery caliber up to 203 millimeters, while the number of heavy cruisers was strictly limited. The London Naval Treaty, concluded in the early 1930s, introduced a clear distinction between heavy and light cruisers. Since no strict limits were imposed on the number of light cruisers, Great Britain decided to focus on their mass construction. The experience gained from creating the York-class heavy cruisers, specifically the ship Exeter, was used as a basis for development. According to the plans of the British Admiralty, the fleet required about 70 cruisers to perform various tasks: escorting convoys, protecting the metropolis, and guarding colonial possessions. The project envisioned the creation of a balanced ship where priority was given to cruising range and seaworthiness, partly at the expense of reduced requirements for armor and maximum firepower. The result of this concept was the Leander-class ships, which were modern units for their time, armed with 8 152mm guns housed in 4 twin turrets. A total of 8 ships of this series were built, 5 according to the original Leander design, and 3 according to the improved one, which is classified in various sources as Modified Leander, Amphion class, or Perth class. In addition to the main caliber artillery, the armament of the cruisers included 102mm dual-purpose guns with an elevation angle of up to 80 degrees. Small caliber anti-aircraft artillery was represented by 12.7mm Vickers machine guns and multi-barrel mounts. Torpedo armament consisted of 4 tube launchers of 533mm caliber, located 1 on each side. There was also a stock of depth charges. Aviation equipment included 1 seaplane. At different periods of operation, Swordfish, Sea Fox, and later Supermarine Walrus models were used. The ships were distinguished by a significant cruising range, about 6,000 nautical miles, and decent firepower. The maximum speed was around 32 knots, which was considered sufficient for cruisers intended for the protection of communications and export operations. A significant part of these ships did not serve in the British fleet, but was transferred to the naval forces of New Zealand and Australia. The geography of their application was extensive, from the waters around Australia to the Mediterranean Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Caribbean Basin. The key difference between the Leander class and the Perth class lay in their appearance and the layout of the propulsion system. Leander-class cruisers had a single funnel, as all boiler equipment was combined into one compartment. This scheme simplified the control of the power plant and allowed for a rapid response to commands to change speed. However, the concentration of vital components in one place created a risk of a total loss of power in the event of a single hit to the boiler room. The Perth project employed a unit system of machinery arrangement. The boilers were divided into 2 isolated compartments, resulting in the appearance of 2 funnels. This became the primary visual distinction from its predecessors. The number of boilers was reduced while their performance was increased. To protect the extended propulsion system, it was necessary to increase the length of the side armor, which led to a growth in displacement and a slight reduction in speed. The main battery artillery consisted of 6-inch Mk-30 guns. The barrel length was about 50 calibers, approximately 26 feet. The guns used shells weighing 112 pounds, the muzzle velocity reached 2,760 feet per second, and the rate of fire was 8 rounds per minute. The ship's artillery armament ensured a maximum firing range of up to 14 miles. The auxiliary 4-inch guns, with a barrel length of about 16 feet, had a muzzle velocity of 2,625 feet per second. The maximum firing range of these mounts was 11 miles at an elevation angle of 45 degrees and 7.5 miles at an angle of 80 degrees. Anti-aircraft armament was represented by 0.50 caliber Vickers machine guns, the effective range of which was about 1 mile against surface targets and up to 1,000 yards at high elevation angles. Mine and torpedo armament included standard 21-inch steam gas torpedoes. The ship was laid down in Portsmouth in 1934 under the name Amphion and entered service in 1936. In 1939, the cruiser was acquired by Australia and received a new name in honor of the city of Perth, located on the continent's west coast. The transfer ceremony took place on July 10, 1939, in the presence of the Duchess of Kent, who solemnly unveiled the plaque with the ship's new name. The crew was formed from experienced sailors who had previously served on the cruiser Adelaide. The ship's first task was a representative mission, a visit to New York to participate in the World's Fair from August 4th to 16th, 1939. Due to the aggravation of the international situation and the inevitability of the start of World War II, the cruiser was assigned to patrol the West Indies. September, October, and November 1939 were spent on operations escorting vessels and patrolling the Caribbean basin. During the execution of tanker escort duties, the ship reached the central part of the Atlantic Ocean. In mid-October 1939, the cruiser encountered a severe storm with wind gusts of up to 75 miles per hour, as a result of which it sustained damage and was forced to dock for repairs. During this period, the ship received a dark gray camouflage intended for operations in Atlantic waters, and also took part in the unsuccessful searches for the German raider Deutschland. In late November 1939, the ship transited the Panama Canal. Despite initial plans to return to Australia by the end of the year, its stay in the region was prolonged. The cruiser repeatedly crossed the Panama Canal, plying between Jamaica and the coast of Colombia. These maneuvers were linked to the need to intercept German vessels, particularly supply tankers leaving neutral ports. Having left the West Indies, the cruiser Perth passed through the Panama Canal on March 2, 1940, and headed for Sydney. On March 31st, the vessel arrived at the coast of Australia. For the greater part of 1940, the ship was engaged in escorting vessels in Australian waters, visiting the ports of Sydney and Melbourne. For about 6 months, Perth served as the flagship of the cruiser squadron under the command of Captain Philip Bowyer Smith. By the middle of the year, the crew commenced gunnery drills and cruises, during which the ship demonstrated good results. At the end of the year, a patrol was conducted in the Indian Ocean with the aim of detecting German raiders, but the search proved fruitless. In December 1940, the ship headed to the Mediterranean Sea as part of an escort. After passing through the Suez Canal on December 24th, the cruiser arrived in Alexandria, where camouflage was applied to the hull on December 27th. In the period up to August 1941, Perth operated in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea, taking part in a number of major operations. The main opposition to the ship was provided by German and, to a greater extent, Italian bomber aircraft. In early January 1941, the cruiser was involved in operations in the Malta area. Its tasks included supporting the aircraft carrier Illustrious, as well as the cruisers Gloucester and Southampton. The latter was lost as a result of an Italian air raid. On January 14th, having returned to Malta, Perth was moored next to the aircraft carrier Illustrious. 2 days later, the ships were subjected to a massive air raid. Heavy bombs fell in the immediate vicinity of the vessels. A fire broke out on one of the transport ships moored nearby. The cruiser's damage control teams assisted in extinguishing the fire, which prevented an explosion and the possible loss of the transport vessel. In February and March, the ship patrolled the Aegean Sea, operated off the coasts of Turkey and Libya, and also provided cover for amphibious landings. In late March 1941, Perth, together with the sister ships Orion and Ajax, as well as other ships, took part in the Battle of Cape Matapan, which ended in the defeat of the Italian fleet. During the naval battle, the battleship Vittorio Veneto sustained serious damage. 3 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers were also sunk. Total losses amounted to about 2,500 people. At the same time, according to official data, the combined Anglo-Australian force under the command of Admiral Cunningham lost 1 torpedo bomber and 3 servicemen. The cruiser Perth did not play a key role in this engagement. In April and May 1941, the ship was involved in operations to evacuate troops from Greece. After the start of the German invasion of Crete on May 20th, the vessel provided fire support to ground forces, and in the period from May 26 to May 28th, it ensured the evacuation of the contingent. The ship was regularly subjected to airstrikes. On May 30th, the first combat damage was received. As a result of an aerial bomb hitting the boiler room, several crew members and evacuated servicemen were killed. Despite the damage, on May 31st, the ship arrived in Alexandria, where it underwent repairs for a period of 2 months. After the completion of repairs, the cruiser was redeployed to the coast of Syria. Its tasks included patrolling the Beirut area and suppressing coastal batteries controlled by the Vichy French government. Later, the ship returned to Alexandria, passed through the Suez Canal, and headed to Australia, arriving there on August 6th. Up until Australia's entry into the war with Japan on December 8, 1941, the crew was engaged in combat training and gunnery exercises. With the outbreak of hostilities in the Pacific region, the ship performed tasks escorting vessels along the Australian coast with port calls in Brisbane and Sydney. In January and February 1942, the zone of escort operations expanded to the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia. The final stage of the ship's service was connected with the campaign in the Java Sea. In late February, an order was received to proceed to Batavia, now Jakarta. Upon arrival on February 24th, the ship joined the ABDA, American, British, Dutch, Australian, Combined Command along with the cruisers Java, De Ruyter, Netherlands, Houston, United States of America, and Exeter, Great Britain. The formation was tasked with intercepting the Japanese amphibious landing and preventing the invasion of the island of Java. The Battle of the Java Sea began on February 27th. For almost the entire day, the formation of ships was observed by Japanese reconnaissance seaplanes. The direct combat engagement began around 16:00 VUs. Visual contact with the enemy was established at a distance of 17 miles. Allied ships, specifically the Perth, De Ruyter, and Java, were armed with 150mm guns and could not return fire at such range. At the same time, the Japanese heavy cruisers had the capability to effectively engage targets at this distance. The active phase of the engagement for the cruiser Perth began upon spotting Japanese destroyers at a distance of 9 to 12 miles. During the exchange of fire, one of the shells from the Japanese cruisers struck the Exeter, causing the ship to lose all headway. Around 5 p.m., the Perth attempted to cover the damaged cruiser with a smokescreen. Approximately 15 minutes later, the Dutch destroyer Kortenaer was sunk, and half an hour after that, the British destroyer Electra went down. Following this, the main forces began withdrawing to the north to draw the attention of the Japanese fleet away from the damaged Exeter. In addition to the main forces, a group of 4 or 5 American destroyers participated in the battle. They launched a torpedo attack against the Japanese ships from a distance of 6 miles, but no hits were recorded. By 7 p.m., with the onset of twilight, the British ships were spotted with the aid of star shells and came under fire. At this moment, the British destroyer Jupiter struck a mine. In the ensuing situation, the cruiser Perth executed a turn and exited the combat zone. During the clash, following the loss of the destroyer Electra, ships were ordered not to stop to rescue survivors. Similar orders were issued repeatedly throughout the battle. Subsequently, the cruisers Perth, Houston, and De Ruyter resumed their artillery duel with the Japanese heavy cruisers Nachi and Haguro. Since the exchange of artillery strikes yielded no significant results, around midnight the Japanese side launched a torpedo salvo. One of the torpedoes struck the cruiser Java, which sank almost instantly around 12 a.m. Other torpedoes hit the cruiser De Ruyter, which also subsequently sank. The remaining large Allied ships, the Perth and Houston, arrived at the port of Tanjung Priok, Batavia, Jakarta, the following day, February 28th. During the brief stopover, they managed to take on only a negligible amount of fuel, about 300 tons of fuel oil, and ammunition was not replenished. The ships received orders to proceed through the Sunda Strait to join other Allied forces. According to intelligence reports, the Japanese squadron was supposed to have moved north, so no threats were expected along the route. In reality, the ship's course lay directly into the area where Japanese forces were concentrating. On the evening of February 28, 1942, the ships were detected by the Japanese destroyer Fubuki, which shadowed them for about half an hour. Soon, other Japanese destroyers appeared at a distance of 5 miles. They laid smoke screens and commenced a torpedo attack. The Allied ships opened return fire and managed to evade the torpedoes. Around 11 p.m., the ships were sighted from the cruiser Natori. The Japanese cruisers Mogami and Mikuma opened fire on them. The ensuing exchange was ineffective and resulted in no significant hits. By 11:55 p.m., the ship set a course for the Sunda Strait, but by this moment, active resistance was hampered by a critical shortage of ammunition. Remaining shells were being conserved to repel destroyer attacks. The ships followed a predictable course, which allowed a group of 4 Japanese destroyers to launch a precise strike with long lance torpedoes. On February 29th at 12:25 a.m., 4 torpedoes struck the cruiser Perth, 3 on the port side and 1 on the starboard. A short time later, the ship sank a few miles from St. Nicholas Point. The cruiser Houston first took a hit to the main caliber turret, which caused the ammunition magazines to flood, and was subsequently struck by 3 torpedoes. It sank approximately 20 minutes later near the site of the Perth's demise. According to Japanese records, about 90 torpedoes were fired during the battle. Crew losses regarding the Perth amounted to 350 killed during the engagement and evacuation, while another 104 died in Japanese captivity. 214 people survived and returned home after the war ended. The site of the shipwreck was discovered in 1967. The ship's bell recovered from the wreckage is now a museum exhibit. The ships Houston and Perth are commemorated by memorials at Arlington National Cemetery, United States of America, and in Australia. Historical books and numerous memorial plaques in various Australian cities are dedicated to the events surrounding the loss of these ships.